we're live. We are going. This is going to be memorable. I'm just going to make
memorable day.
Memorable jokes all night long. So
Hey
that
guys.
we can memorialize.
It's 2021 Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
And we are super excited to be able to share and discuss life in this extravagant world we're in with you guys. This is a special weekend, obviously, because it represents a lot of sacrifice and heartache, but also gratitude in a lot of areas, right?
Yeah.
And I think both Jordan and I, we have several interesting topics we want to go over with you guys tonight, but I just want to lay down some interesting statistics, not really statistics, but information about Memorial Day itself. Facts. Yeah, man.
Facts.
Yeah.
Not like fax machine, which is really old. But fax.
Old.
F-A-C. I'm just like, what am I spelling?
F-A-C-T-S. F-A-C-T-S.
That reminds me of the
Super close.
The old.
Super close.
What is it? Homer Simpson was like, I am so smart and spell smart wrong. S-M-R-T. I mean,
Classic.
S-M-A-R-T.
I am super S-A-M-R-A-T.
Yeah.
I'm Lexexia.
Ooh, Tammy Wood starts us off.
Let's see, Dexia.
Ooh. You get into your stats, and then I want to talk about Memorial Day a little bit, because I have some feelings. And some
lonely feelings. Okay, so Memorial Day. Obviously, it's a day typically in America that we associate with barbecues, but it goes a little bit deeper than that.
What
right?
day isn't good for barbecues, though? Well, in Oregon, 3 days are good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So the tradition actually goes back even before America, before a lot of the countries were established, even in Europe. Tradition, they even have reference to it, and I'm sure it's even happened before then, but even in ancient Greek times, they used to hold annual days of remembrance for departed comrades. They would do public displays of mourning for fallen soldiers.
I wonder what that looked like.
Yeah, right? I know, public displays of mourning. Like, they would pay probably people to go cry on the streets.
We could all learn from that a little bit. I think we all kind of hide things a little. We shelter ourselves from death, and then we hide our reaction to it. And I don't think it's healthy.
That's actually a really interesting perspective, the hiding our reaction to it.
Mm-hmm. For some cultures, it's like, let's go! And they just
because also
launch into it.
A lot of death in other cultures is at the home. Whereas death in America is commonly, more often, in either like a retirement facility or in a hospital. Yeah. It's more of a masked thing. So obviously, Memorial Day was, well, not obviously, but it actually kind of originated around the Civil War era. It's kind of cool. There was even Memorial Day, there was a term. And what was that term, Jordan?
Decoration Day.
Decoration Day.
Yeah.
So before Memorial Day, Decoration Day was a popular term. Right. And it was,
that's kind of what morphed into Memorial Day.
Right. And actually, so what was unique about Decoration Day is they literally, decorated gravestones. They commemorated soldiers, and it was actually a memorial or a decoration for the Confederate as well as the Northern soldiers.
So here's a quote from the guy that did it, which kind of, I didn't realize this was in one of the articles we were reading earlier. We probably should have realized that. It comes from General John A. Logan, was a leader of the Organization for Northern Civil War Veterans. He said the 30th of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land.
Wow. Okay, and not that I'm saying I want there to be a civil war again in the future. Obviously, I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. No. But to put things in perspective, that statement right there, how wild is it to think if there was to be a civil war, in that era, it was majority of it was populated from the Midwest East, right? But
Hmm.
to think about every city having some type of battle or war take or
Well, it wasn't every city that had a battle, but it was like the bodies would be there, so they're buried and remembered there. So he's saying like
yeah,
your
okay, that's
your
true.
dead has come back. It says on the first Decoration Day, General James Garfield made a speech at Arlington National Cemetery, and 5,000 participants decorated the graves of the 20,000 Civil War soldiers buried there. So that means each. That's I mean that's a lot of people and a lot of
Hmm.
graves to do.
Yeah.
But that's cool.
Yeah. And of course, another thing that actually goes along with Memorial Day historically, this is actually kind of interesting. And a lot of it was triggered around the Vietnam War. Memorial Day was one of the most common days of protests as well, for wars, and Vietnam was a catalyst to start protesting wars during that time as well. So during Memorial Day, that would often be a time where you would see a lot of the protests,
Hmm.
um, in that concern for the population.
What's interesting too is that going over some of the things that we were learning about this, because some of it I didn't know. I mean, I know that I used to think I knew what Memorial Day was, and I came to have a very different understanding of that once I served alongside other men and women who were in service to their country. Sorry, I was in infantry, so there wasn't a lot of women. If a woman showed up, it yeah, the most of the guys weren't very nice because they hadn't seen a girl in a very long time. Um, but I digress. But what's interesting is it was declared on a certain day. So in the quote that I just read, it was May 30th was the actual day that they celebrated it up until, was it, what do we figure, 1968
It's
was when they
1968. Yeah.
finally moved it to the last Monday in May. So technically and historically, most Memorial Days have been celebrated on today, which
Hmm.
is kind of cool.
Which is very cool. Yeah, I think that's very cool. Um, so there's several um, kind of different traditions surrounding it, and it's actually kind of an interesting dynamic when you think about the South
Hmm.
and their history
Their
as far as losing
contribution.
the war, right?
Right.
Um, but one thing that was really cool, and it still actually takes place today, is in 1866. A group of Southern women actually, during the first celebration of Memorial Day, in an act of kind of grace and forgiveness, they actually laid flowers across graves of Confederate soldiers as well as Union soldiers,
Hmm.
and it was kind of like seen as an act of healing. So even though Memorial Day is a time of memorializing, obviously, the soldiers that fell on
Right.
both sides of our nation, it's also a time of recognizing and healing. I think it can be as well, not
Absolutely.
just a time of thinking about the bad guys we killed
Well, and that was a
or the good
conversation
guys
we were
that
having
died.
before. Is like, sometimes soldiers just get ordered. Like we
Yeah,
had. So the
yeah,
example that we were talking about was we had the Vietnam War, and some people, that country wasn't doing great things. Whether or not we fought it right or fought it at the right time or whatever is nothing to do with the fact that some
right,
of those guys were called up again. They were selective service, got called in, they were drafted, and they did what they had to do. And so we still would honor them. We may not say like, "Oh, we thought that the war they were in was the most ethical." I have my own opinions. Other people have their own opinions, and a lot of those men were treated very, very poorly when they returned, which is sad. Especially considering like they were going there at the time because they were thinking we were doing it for our own protection and for the protection of the world, which may still be true. We there's still things we're finding out about what
well, a little
happened there.
quick thing there. Not even a lot of them. I don't know if it was a majority,
Mm-hmm.
but a significant number of them weren't going there willingly.
Right.
They were
Yeah.
drafted, right?
Yeah,
That's
that's what I
another
mean. But a lot of people
aspect to
during
it.
that time too. I don't know. I'd have to see the numbers. I don't know if
I'll
it's
look
a
that. I'll look
majority
that
or
up real
not.
quick.
But if a lot of people just signed up, they were like, "I'm going to do this." It was like World War I and World War II. A lot of people, like I think even my grandfather, like signed up before he was old enough to do it. Just faked it because back then you could fake like you can fake IDs now, but they can do a lot more background checks on you to make sure that you're going to the right place. But a lot of guys went over even before they were supposed to. I was looking at pictures of the guys on D-Day that were launching on the boats, and some of them they don't look a day older than my oldest son, and a good 70% of them didn't survive. That was the first wave of those boats.
So here's some of the statistics I have for Vietnam War. Um, eh, it doesn't give kind of all the stuff we were wanting, but it says, where was it? Around 30. Oh, that's not quite right. So it was saying 30, 30% of the deaths, of the combat deaths in
Hmm.
Vietnam were draftees.
Yeah.
But it
So
doesn't
what
say
we'd
what
yeah you'd have to figure out like
percentage.
what was the size of the military at the time, and then what you'd have to figure out is how many people entered at that time, and what was the percentage. So it's probably stuff that we can't quickly get. I would assume, especially during war times like that, it would be interesting to see what would happen right now. But I know that like when 9/11 happened, a lot of people signed up just because they're like, I have to do something. A lot of people went back in because they just had to do something. A lot of people got called back up that were in the reserves, but went willingly to be there for whatever was going to happen from that.
So it says two-third. It says about two-third of the Vietnam veterans were volunteers.
Yeah,
So about
yeah,
two-thirds was
which makes
volunteers.
sense because when we're in times like that, people usually answer the call on their own without being forced.
And that kind of makes sense as far as the death rate too, because
Hmm.
if I mean 30% is close to one-third of the
Well,
deaths, right?
and this sounds really bad, but like statistically, if you got drafted, there were, I mean, there was, I believe it was even here in near us in Washington up there, right south of SeaTac. I can't remember the name of the base there, but they did training there. Like they had boot camp everywhere. That doesn't happen now. Most boot camps happen in a handful of different places across the United States. Most of them are back east, but then they were doing like just quick trainings and just chuck them out there. So if you got drafted, your
Mm.
training was not as good because usually you got plowed through the closest one that was
Mm-hmm.
near you. But if you entered, you had a lot more options. So I talked to like a dad of a friend of mine, and he had said when it came up to be drafted, he delayed because he was in college, but he knew as soon as he finished college there was no chance that he wasn't going to be drafted. And so he just went in as an officer because he knew he would get better training. He would get to choose the things he wanted to do, and he was going
Yeah,
to serve anyway. So he was like,
smart.
I'm going to take my best shot. So a lot of times people would do that too, because
Did
they
they get the
know.
option though?
Well,
Was it always?
the thing is like the draft, from what I understood, is like you get on the radio or the TV, and they would announce what numbers had to report for testing. Because if you got drafted and you had, say, like flat feet or allergies or you had asthma or whatever, you couldn't serve, but you had to go in and take the physical.
I was
So,
wondering about that though. During a time of need, I think
mhm,
they make exceptions for certain medical things. So like if you had like asthma, maybe you would be doing more like administrative stuff, not necessarily
nope, you have to pass a
clerical.
PT test
In
because.
Vietnam,
Oh yeah,
Vietnam era, did they
yeah. I
did
know
that?
people that have been got rejected for asthma. Yeah,
In
full on. And the
during that
reason,
time?
I'll tell you why, is because you might be doing clerical, but they don't know where you're going to be doing clerical. What if you're doing clerical
Hmm.
on the front lines and everyone has to be able to pick up a gun. Doctors in the army have to go out and shoot and qualify. They're not as good, but they have to be able to do it because if they find themselves in that situation, they have to be able to do that. So there are certain physical things, and there's certain jobs that they've started lifting that will just never go overseas, like IT stuff and stuff like that,
Hmm.
that they've started to change a little bit on. But I'm even questioning that. The only reason they're doing it is because they were having a harder time finding people to serve in those areas because people have gotten gradually fatter as a whole. And so people weren't able to pass it. But like you want a fit person or someone who can at least pass the bare minimum. That's where all the questions about like should women be in the infantry come into play. It was like it's not a matter of would they be good or not. It's just I have to be able to lift up the guy next to me and he has to be able to lift up me, or at least within reason. And that's generally not doesn't transfer the sexes super well. So when you talk about front lines, it's not about like whether or not they think they can do it. It's in a when you need to do those types of things, can you do it situation. And you wouldn't put like a kid in there because they're not strong enough. Anyway, so it has nothing to do with like skill or anything because there's definitely women who shoot way better than a lot of men, but they're not great at lifting up those guys when they're dumb and they get hit. So, um,
Well,
but
you know,
anyway, what I want to say about Memorial Day is this. I
oh
get
yeah, tell me.
I get thank yous all the time for serving. Number one, I'll tell my story real quick. I did not deploy, so I have a hard time even like taking that thank you. I did sign up. I did raise my hand, and that doesn't really go away. But I served about a year, and then I got kicked out because I broke my back. I wanted to keep doing it. I would keep doing it. I don't regret it at all. It was a great experience. But because of that, I do know quite a few guys who served and still are in, or they did pull that. They did pay that ultimate sacrifice. And one person that I always think of on this day, like no joke, every time Memorial Day comes around, if someone thanks me, I think I don't. It's not me that needs the thanks. It's these guys. And a guy that I was in jump school with in Airborne, where I ultimately got my papers to leave because the chute didn't work as it should, is Private First Class Michael Headley. And it wasn't until later on that I found out, I believe it was 101st he was with, that he went out and didn't come back. And I don't know the details of it. Well, I know a little bit, but they're not like super nice. So, but he was a great guy. He was told the most awful jokes that would make you feel disgusting inside. But also, one crazy thing about this guy was, so I roomed with him in airborne school. Young
And
kid.
real quick, when you say when he went out, he was deployed.
Yeah.
When you say he went out.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, he went out on a mission and didn't return. And and I just remember like he was crazy. He joined and opted to go to airborne school solely because he was afraid of heights. Like that's why he did it.
That's
He was
counterphobic 6 right there.
He was like, I'm going to conquer this and I'm going to do it. And he had the greatest time. And one thing that he told me, because I didn't get to do the night jump, that was our last jump. You jump in the dark. And I remember he came back in and he was so jazzed. They'd done it. He got his wings. Some guy, the way they give you the wings, by the way, if you do it the right way, is it's a pin that goes on your chest. And they put it on your chest and then they punch the pins into you like it, so that it stabs you. So you get marked by the pin.
Nice.
Yeah, it's super clean, super sterile situation. Cloth and everything getting shoved into
Never
your
a
skin.
single staph infection.
But he was so excited, and when he had jumped, he didn't know he could. He said all you could do is hear voices everywhere, and people were screaming, and he's screaming, and whatever. And all of a sudden, his feet touch something, and he was like, "What is this?" And he starts to run, and he said, "I pulled on the risers to go forward because I realized I was landing on someone else's chute in the middle of the air." And he just started to run, and he ran across the person's chute and shot off the side.
Oh my gosh.
And somehow
That's amazing.
Somehow survived that, and then didn't survive the mission. So
That sounds a lot like a James Bond maneuver, or
dude,
like
seriously, when he was telling me, I was like, "Are you serious?" Like,
right.
he's like, "Well, it was dark, so I think that's what was happening." Like, just
It's like, you tell me, man. I don't know. I don't know.
so, but he made
That's
it,
a-
and he
that's
went
a
to
cool
he went
story.
to a jump unit and jumped all the time, and then he did
That's
end up
wild.
dying on his first deployment.
Well, I got several actually military-esque world events that I
Yeah.
wanted to run by you
I
and
I
see
saw
what you.
some of them. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about them, and then I think we should do those, and then we should end on well, I have a couple things, but we
Okay.
need to talk about this K Falls thing.
Yes, I really want to know more about the K-Fall things.
Okay, I don't know
Um,
a ton because not a ton has happened yet, but we can talk
Yeah.
about it.
Okay,
and
yeah,
what I
that's
think might
fantastic.
happen.
Okay, love it. So first of all, world events that our listeners need to kind of be cognizant of. Okay, most of you have probably heard about the Ryanair situation that took place in Europe. There was a flight. So Ryanair is kind of like Spirit Airlines in Europe. So it's like one of the cheaper.
Cattle cars.
Yeah, one of the cheaper flights. Like you can fly from one country to another for like $50 or something like that. Okay, super affordable.
Done.
So Belarus, it was a Ryanair airline plane. Okay, and it was grounded by Belarus. So what happened is Belarus ordered its military to scramble a fighter jet to force a Ryanair plane that was supposed to be going to Lithuania. And change course and land in the capital of Belarus. So they were saying because there was a bomb threat on the plane. The Belarus authorities were saying, hey, there's a bomb threat. You guys need to land your plane. So the Ryanair lands the plane, and come to find out there was no bomb to be found, and actually there was no actual true report of there being a bomb even called in. But what happened was the Belarus authorities came on the plane, arrested a journalist that was basically like talking bad against Belarus and Russia, and arrested this.
I'm already full in on this. This is definitely conspiracy time.
Arrested the dissident is what they're calling him,
Mm-hmm.
And then allowed the plane to take off again. So what was like insanely sketchy is this flight actually didn't even take off in Belarus. It was a flight from Athens to Lithuania. So but because they were flying over Belarus airspace, the Belarus, which is kind of like a subsidiary of Russia, scrambled its fighter jets, made the plane land, and then
they must have really wanted this
journalist.
Guy. Like, really wanted him.
So a lot of the European Union agencies are saying, like, this is essentially like state-ran terrorism. Like, you guys, this is like you're encroaching on not only this independent organization, but you don't like, you set a terrible precedence basically of like people are not going to want to fly in and out of or over your airspace because you're basically a terrorist group now at this point.
Well, what this reminds me of is like when China was asking for us to extradite people to them that had said bad things about them that were just U.S. citizens.
Yeah, and it really gives a precedence to the fact of how terrifying the restrictions of free speech are becoming.
Yeah. That's why it's so important. That's why I truly think, like, I understand the whole private business clause, all that kind of stuff. But if you're going to be running speech, it should just, unless it's illegal in that country, it should just go. Like, you don't fact check it. You don't whatever. Like, let speech be free because it's not your job.
It's okay to fact check things. I think it's important to fact check
I'm saying
things.
Like, but they don't. Have you ever seen one that's actually fact checked? Because they aren't. They usually just, if you click on the fact check, which I always do.
Wait, what are you talking about?
So I'm saying, like, when they put a fact check, they'll say, like, fact check, this is
wrong. Are you
wrong.
talking about social media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, no. I'm just saying, like, news organizations in general. Like, you can say what you want.
Fact checking is fine. I'm just saying, when it comes to free speech, like, don't even try to, like, auto fact check people, because then you're making it worse is what you're doing. I mean, we've had that conversation 1,000 times. It's just like you fight falsehood with truth. You don't fight it with telling people.
Terrifying kind of I don't know if it's unprecedented. Like, I'm sure journalists, well, obviously journalists like the Arab whatever, Sheikh Lord, whatever, I can't remember his name. Sorry, guys. Cool. But that murdered the other journalist. Like, it's becoming a dangerous thing to be a journalist against organizations now.
And here, yes, for sure. And it's scary. Like, if you want to say, like, try to say something that's on the conservative side of things right now. Like, not even radical. Like, don't even go, like, Trump supporter on somebody, but just like, hey, I would like to, like, talk about the Constitution and conserving rights for all people. Like, that, even that right there will get you the crazy pants. Like, and it's wild right now that I guess what it looks like from the external perspective, at least for a lot of people, is that they just don't know how to either have civil discourse or how to be okay with other ideas. Like, or talk about it.
I think from micro level, yes, and I think that's a accurate statement. But from a more macro level, like, this isn't even conservative or liberal. This is like at a dictatorial level of
this is
world politics.
Yes,
which is
to
terrifying.
stop a plane and do that, like, it's awful. I don't think it should be allowed. I don't know what the answer is, but I mean, it's like China censured a few different people when Trump left presidency, because they talked bad about China. They actually, specifically, not about the Chinese people. They love the Chinese people, which I would argue even Trump loved the Chinese people. It's the Chinese Communist Party that they don't like and that they spoke poorly about. And they censured them, saying, you're not allowed in our country, and if you come here, we'll arrest you. Mm. So that's one thing to say, at least.
So this is what's interesting. We have governments. Okay, this is really interesting, guys. We have governments that are playing almost like a state terrorism kind of act on
Right.
free speech, right? But then this is how crazy the world is. In the world, there's always crazy stuff going on, guys. I recognize that, but I'm also just I'm conscious to the extremes, I think.
Yeah.
On the other side, we have what's going down in Mexico lately.
Right.
So in Mexico lately, um, we've been having. Well, let me just start with this. In Mexico, since last September, there's been 88 politicians or candidates for office that have been killed or murdered by different types of cartels because they're going against the cartels' policies.
I'm going to try to draw some connections here with one
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Have Bill or Hillary been down there?
I do not have any. I have not researched Bill or Hillary's involvement in this situation.
I'm just going to say I think they're involved.
Okay. Okay.
They're
Who
up in the
knows?
death. They're up in the
Who
death camp.
knows? Who knows with Hillary? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but what's happening lately is with the cartels is now what they've been doing is they are really pressing the game, the cartels, and they have been going into like basically police leaders' homes and torturing them
That's fun.
until they gave the names and addresses of fellow officers. And now what they're doing is they're going to the homes of these officers when they're off duty, taking them out of their houses in front of their families and shooting them, like mowing them down. So we have a situation where we have cartels. And, even like a government, I guess, is someone could consider them a cartel in some states, but
I think some governments they are, or actually, I would say specifically, if they're not, they're allowing one to operate and cashing in on it.
right. And I think what's going on in a lot of these southern states is so these cartels, what they're basically doing is they're declaring war, right? They're
Right.
declaring war on the government. So it's like a mini militia, right? Going against the government because they want to practice a way of life that they feel like is what they see as
Yeah.
appropriate. And so they're aiming at basically eradicating what Mexico calls their like elite state force. And so they're actually going after their tactical group, their tactical force, the
Which
cartels.
arguably we know, from people that we've known, and I haven't been there, but maybe you have, like that police are not the ones to trust in Mexico. Like they'll take bribes and stuff like that. So we know that that's kind of the stereotype. Whether or not that's most of them, that's not for me to call. I'm not there. But I would say to all this, I this has been a fear of mine in our country with this all like defund the police, all
Mm,
the police are racist. When the more that we push that direction, the harder it becomes. It's not that it's saying that I'm not against reform and improving things. I think there's always room for improvement. But like I had someone say to me today, it was like, well, they're all racist and or they had struggle with racism and that's where we need to attack it from. And I said, I don't think that you can say that most all of them or even many of them are racist. I think that every race and ethnicity, group, religion or whatever struggles with prejudice or struggles with dealing with that at times. We're human. All of us are human. We struggle with people who are different than us. And that's hard to come to grips with those things. It's also a sign of maturity to do those things. But when we push that direction and we start labeling and pushing that way, it's supposed to be a law enforcement agency. You're creating these teams, and now everyone's just like, oh, you saw we've well, I'm assuming we've most of us have seen some of the videos of people saying like, I'm scared, you're gonna kill me, and the police aren't doing anything yet. And like, okay, this is like. So what I said back to this guy was this. He said there's 70% of our police are white. And I said, that's great. I like that actually represents our population pretty well as a split. So I don't know why you're saying that, except if you're saying that they're all racist, which we know they're not all racist. It's just a hard thing to do when you start labeling and pushing those types of things on people. You cause we've spent the last year, the summer of love, destroying some of the biggest cities in our nation, all in outcry against the police and how there's a fly here that are supposedly harming a certain group of people more than others. I think we're
well,
dangerously heading in that direction if we keep up that attitude.
it's a really interesting, delicate balancing act, right? Between the concern of the people And this is what a lot of gun right activists are see the value, not always, but to a degree, of having their own you know ability to maintain their own militias with weapons as well.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a balancing act of government or authority figures and their power versus the people's power,
Hmm.
right? And so that's where we have this this constant kind of tug of war within our country, and because it's such an important thing to our country, specifically based on our history, right? Wanting to get away from dictator rulership, that sort of thing. So
Right.
we have such a heightened sensitivity to it, and I see both extremes of wanting to be very cautious as far as not letting a government be dictator, tyrannical, but then at the same side, not wanting to deteriorate into cartel overrun,
Yeah.
deterioration. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
and
and I think that's what's interesting with ours, like setting up as um I was reading about this actually today, and this is something I'm glad that you said that because this is interesting. So I was reading about the Constitution, and I had said last week that I read it. Every once in a while I sit down and I try to read through it and try to glean like what was going on here, because there's a lot of things that are said and there's a lot of different interpretations. And one article that I came across was actually talking about governmental emergency powers. So talking about, hey, could someone use those for wrong? You could weigh whether or not you think that they're wrong this time or not. This fly is going to kill me. But when this one of the quotes from this article, and I'll post it in our notes and stuff. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Said when the states were formed, the federal government in 1789, they did so pursuant to the Constitution. The Constitution was written to establish and to limit the federal government. So it wasn't written to establish it, it was written to limit it. And in 1791, just 2 years later, the Constitution was amended to add the Bill of Rights. The original understanding of the Bill of Rights was that it restrained only the federal government by those rights. This goes on to say that it's been ruled on and held up in many different cases that it also pertains to states, that there is no such thing as emergency powers. So these states who are still operating under emergency powers actually constitutionally and judicially don't. It's a farce. But what's interesting to what you just said, and it's interesting because some of these places don't operate in this, but we do, and it's hard for us to understand, especially when you get this construed idea of what, you know, is it a system of racism? Is it a system that's against the poor? Is it a system whatever? No, it's a system that's supposed to be based on the governed giving the consent to be governed, and it's a negative right. So that's why the Constitution seems so off, and that's why it's so deep, in that a negative right restrains the government for interfering with the exercise of a pre-existing right. Thus, the First Amendment does not grant the freedom of speech because it comes from our humanity, but it does prohibit Congress from infringing upon it. So it comes from our humanity, and it goes on to talk about why they wrote the Bill of Rights, and there was a bunch of lawmakers that were trying to write in specific rights that we had, and they opted not to because they said if we list some, then some later on some will be infringed upon that are there. And so that's why they put in the Bill of Rights, and they said they are so numerous that we cannot write them in this document, but the rights that are given by being human, by just being born, should not be infringed upon by any government or law. Which is interesting. That's like what you just said. It's a people, you can tell it's a people that wrote it that were leaving tyranny,
mhm.
saying we never want tyranny again. We always want it to be a rule of the people. And I fear, as we read about Mexico, there's so many common practices to how people are being taught today that we're now just giving over some of those rights, and we shouldn't.
Well, we had, I think, and granted, as far as my depth of knowledge in geopolitical affairs, especially with South America and
Right.
Mexico, or Central America, I guess,
I'm
I
only using
think,
the example of attacking the law enforcement specifically because that's very common to what's
yeah,
going on for us right now.
I think that there is a common thread from what I have read as far as the the degree the degree of corruption within the upper echelons of society and government. And so if they don't continue to have a kind of counterbalancing, right?
Hmm.
Where we have the judiciary that counteracts the presidential, that counteracts the congressional.
Yeah.
I think you have to have a really, really, really robust way of checks and balances, right?
Yeah.
And I think that until that happens and until there's a way of eliminating corruption, then organizations such as cartel will have the ability to basically get the influence that they need. And
Yeah.
that's
And
maybe
I'm sure we have
you know,
some of that going on here as well. I mean, I think that
right.
those of us, and we would talk about the deep state, like there are
Mhm.
probably people within our government, it's higher probability than none, that are doing some of what we're talking about.
I just think there's
But
less there of that being
I would say, like,
critiqued.
in reference to this, because this kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week, but it has to do with this whole Mexico thing too, and some of the things that we need to remember that we have to hold on to so that we don't see this happen. But during the war, so going back to the Civil War, which we talked about at the beginning, because it was Memorial Day, Abraham Lincoln arrested a bunch of people that were writing bad things about him and about the decisions that were being made going into the Civil War. He had them arrested. They were journalists. So talking about journalists and everything that's going on. So later on, Lambton P. Milligan, he sued for his freedom. He was one of the journalists that was locked up during the beginning of the Civil War, and he won. That is one of the cases, it's in case law, that says it was a unanimous decision that cited hundreds of times that the Supreme Court rejected the concept that emergency somehow creates or increases governmental power. The court condemned emergency as a doctrine, the fruits of which is none more pernicious. This condemnation, pernicious, yeah, sorry. This condemnation is still the law of the land today, and it applies to state as well as the federal. So it was not only a federal, but also pushes to holding the states to the same thing. So this guy's argument is saying emergency powers, even, it doesn't matter, no matter a war, flood, pandemic, fear, or myth, none of those give governmental power to say emergency and create new laws and restrictions on the people, because that breaks the original constitution of holding down those human rights that were not granted by the government, but the government was limited from ever going against them.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start to have emergency laws, because you have state laws and you have federal laws, and when those start to contradict each other, trying to decide what one overrules the other.
That's what's interesting about
well.
this is it's not, there's no laws contradicting each other. It's just saying when they joined the Union, they agreed to the Constitution. No laws that they can make can break said Constitution.
Ooh, it'd be interesting too.
So,
were those journalists though part of the Union, or were they part of the?
No. They were part. The states were formed at the time, so they were part of.
Oh no! I'm talking about the journalists.
They were,
because
they were part of the North. They were part of the North.
Okay.
Yeah. So
if they
he arrested his own people. Well, even that, he was president over all the states. They had seceded, but he had said that doesn't. We're not accepting that.
Right.
So he was saying that doesn't count. And there's a lot of great. If you ever get a chance to go see the Lincoln Memorial, there's a lot of great history. Like I could spend days there, like going through a lot of that stuff that they have, which I didn't realize they even have a bunch of stuff down below. Found that later. Didn't get enough time to like see it when I was there, but I thought it was interesting. All that kind of ties together from talking about Mexico, the journalists getting arrested. That's weird.
Which is crazy. One last thing, as far as like a silver lining. Well, actually, let me say a bad thing and then I'll say a good thing. Okay.
Do it.
So a kind of crazy thing. I don't know if I think it's maybe bad. I don't know, but something that's been taking place. So
if you have to wonder if it's bad,
I think it is bad. So something that
you live in the first world,
right? Taking place in Libya lately is that they've been using drones that are equipped with explosives, and they've been launching them. The Libyan state has been launching them against the Libyan uprising, essentially individuals. And what happens is what they're calling them, basically, they're calling them like, killer robots. But what's really crazy about it, it's not surprising to me. Like, okay, missiles are smart missiles, right? Like they have tracking and all this sort of stuff, right?
Right.
But these drones, what they're doing is they're launching them from their side, and then they're not being controlled by somebody on their side. The drones are then seeking out individuals. And then they're just killing people at their own discretion.
Let me help you. That's bad. Like
that's bad.
That's
right?
really bad. Like,
yeah. Okay. But the drones are seeking individuals out, killing them without interaction from the side that's launching them.
Right. And so I guess I would say if
Oh
there
my
are
gosh.
if there are missiles being launched and innocent people being hurt, it doesn't matter if you agree with the Libyans, agree with that. It doesn't matter if you agree with Hamas, agree with Israel. That's bad. When innocent
It's terrible.
people, when you're just launching missiles for no reason and people are getting killed because you just want to kill people,
Well,
that's bad.
here's what's crazy about it. There,
You're a
I mean,
terrorist. Like
missiles are
literally, you're a terrorist.
where you in that case you're a state-run terrorist, right?
Yeah, it's still
Um,
terrorist.
so
If you want to do a
what's
Venn
crazy about it,
diagram about it, I'm fine with that too. But you're still a
the
terrorist.
drones are they're not actually shooting missiles. Like what they're doing is they get
They
close to
are
the
the
target.
missile.
They are the missile.
Yeah,
Right, that's exactly
yeah.
it.
So
They
they're
get close to
okay.
the individuals and then blow up.
Let's just. I'm coining it now. These are kamikaze drones.
Kamikaze drones, yes. It's terrible. But
It is terrible.
on a lighter note, guys,
People. There's a just warning people in the United States. Total Second Amendment. Like, I love it. All that kind of stuff. As soon as you strap a firearm to a drone and it flies into the air,
or
it's a
explosives.
really, really big fine and a lot of federal prison time that you can do for having an unmanned aircraft that has a weapon on it. So don't do it.
Jordan's never
Don't
going to do it again. He's not going to do it again, guys.
Yeah.
He promised. He
Yeah.
promised he won't do it again.
I would be gone for at least a decade if I got caught doing that. So just don't do it. Don't do
Again.
it.
Okay, so
Again. Yeah. Whatever.
a positive kind of encouraging thing. I know Jordan's not a fan of vaccines, but an encouraging thing.
I am a fan of vaccines.
I'm just teasing you. Okay.
I'm not a fan of the
an,
COVID vaccine.
An
I'll admit that.
encouraging thing as far as diabetes goes, a really cool study pertaining to diabetes has recently been done. And
can I have you because I saw that I read the headline to this, but
yeah.
I want you to clarify something up front for me so that I know this information going through this. Is this type 1 or type 2?
Type 1.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So
if it was type 2, I'd say stop eating sugar, y'all. Like, you can fix that problem.
Well, this is a really bummer type of diabetes because
No, yeah, because you could have it no matter what.
nothing
So.
you can do. And the saddest cases are, I mean, personally, it's children, right?
Yeah.
Like you're all of a sudden your kid is diabetes and you don't know why. And sometimes we don't know why, but oftentimes what happens is your immune system attacks cells in your pancreas that produce insulin, right?
Right.
So
there's nothing you can do to come back from that. Although I will say, because I follow the keto community and all that kind of stuff, there are a lot of people who are off their insulin and everything that just manage it very low carb under a doctor's supervision, but like they don't have any issues because they don't eat anything that they need it for.
So, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain it a little bit to people a little bit more in detail. Type 1, real quick, just super quick.
Yeah.
So type 1 diabetes, what happens oftentimes, is the immune system of people with type 1 diabetes targets what's called beta cells in the pancreas that make insulin, right? And it's that insulin is a hormone that allows cells to absorb glucose from our bloodstream, right? So the body's ability to control blood sugar levels, so blood that has sugar in it, that's how they prick themselves and you see how much sugar you have in your blood.
Is that how that works?
Yeah.
I'm just making sure. It was really
blood
complicated.
Sugar levels basically start to increase, right, once those cells are eliminated from your pancreas.
Right.
But in this study, what they found, and it's really cool, is even people that have recently, it's more effective for people that have recently been diagnosed within the past 6 months with type 1 diabetes. But usually when you get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, your pancreas and those beta cells are still secreting a small amount of insulin. And so they found with this vaccine, what it does is basically it helps to not eliminate, but decrease the effects of that autoimmune response on attacking those cells. So those cells basically get immunity to the body's attack on itself. And what it does is it allows the remaining amount of insulin that is still being secreted from your pancreas to basically prolong and enable yourself to still control your blood sugars, not necessarily to the amount that you would have had prior to that autoimmune attack, but it makes a significant effect on people's life and quality of life, and it actually helps a lot with people that actually tend to go hypoglycemic as well.
Right.
So a really encouraging study that I always
is it a vaccine or is it more of like it stops that process so that they don't go further into type 1?
So
Because I guess you could call it a vaccine. I guess for me, that's not
Mhm.
like you wouldn't want to just give that to everybody.
Well, and that's the thing. So it's only effective for people with basically half of type 1 diabetics
Hmm.
have this certain what's called HLA gene
So
variation.
let me ask you this,
So it's
because
only effective for about half
I
of
know that
type
type
1.
one is like the you don't grow out of this, like this isn't your own fault
Hmm.
necessarily, but is it auto? Can it be triggered like as autoimmune? Because I know
So
that some
yeah,
people are born with it. That's just
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
their
It's
luck of
it's
the draw.
it's
But then are
there's
some people like, because like we're all kind of predisposed to certain autoimmune things. Like if I do something
uh-huh.
to trigger them, now I'm stuck with this problem. I could get
Yeah.
Hashimoto's, or I could get any number of things. That's just like real, and not my life, but in my family. Um, so then you start gaining all of these different allergies and stuff throughout life, and that's autoimmune. Once you've triggered that, like there's kind of no going back. Is that kind of how type 1 can be?
Yeah.
So
So
so I guess my
it
question to be is,
can be.
I want to see a study on what leads someone to react to get into that. Like what could we do to
Well,
prevent that?
it's that's the hard part because about it's a genetic variation.
Right.
So it's a genetic variate like the way those insulin cells are those beta cells are created from birth
Mm-hmm.
have a genetic mutation that
Gotcha.
makes them more susceptible to our body's natural antibodies attaching to them.
But so what? I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, maybe you're more susceptible to that. What, like at what age and what causes that to take place? What could you do to prevent that from ever
So
happening? Because
usually
I
it has
get
to
it.
do with
If it already happens, you're screwed. Like
in this
you're going down
situation,
this road, and maybe
there's not a
this
ton
treatment
you
will
can
help.
do to prevent this type of thing because what happens is, as we grow, right,
Right.
our body's natural immune system starts to become stronger and starts to become more developed. And
Right.
so basically, what happens is, as your
I
body's immune
gotcha.
system becomes stronger and more robust, essentially you uh, gain more of these proteins that start to bind and connect to those beta insulin cells. So it's not necessarily, I guess you could give somebody, if you know they have that genetic variation, you could start giving them immunosuppressants. But then
But I guess
it's
so.
a
If it's a
balancing
certain
act
kind of
there.
protein or whatever, I get. So I have like, there's a ton of different theories I have, and this just goes back. And I don't know if any of them are real. I just like studies I would love to see
Yeah.
done that are way smarter than I am. But like, if you think about like it's we're a system, we're electricity, like whatever. So I'm just trying to apply my own like troubleshooting IT stuff to this. But if you're like, okay, that's what happens. What if there's proteins getting there? How'd they get there? Like, so some people would never react to those, and so they're going to be fine. But what are you either ingesting around? What's your environment that now makes those proteins be there? Would they always be there, or is it something that has changed in our food system? Because
In this variation, yes, because so these people were born. Those proteins are actually not bad proteins. Those are
mhm.
everybody produces these immune cells,
Okay,
right? So this is just a normal immune cell that you produce.
that was my
But
question.
these
Like,
people
are they
are
different or damaged protein? Because, like, say, like
no
factory farm meat, you're going to get protein, but some of your protein is going to be broken, or it's going to there's going to be
right.
certain things that are going to change in that
Yeah.
that aren't as strong. So you're building muscle and everything, but your cells are weaker. So like if you build skin cells with fats from vegetable oils, we know that those aren't as good. They're damaged cells. They're not as good as if you say you had good like CLAs from like grass-fed beef or something like that.
Right.
We know that by looking at them. So I guess I'm saying is like what did this protein originate? Because we are what we eat. Like, where did it
Well, in
originate
this
from? And have we
situation,
seen an uptick as we've gotten more advanced in our society? So we could like
yeah.
tie it to something like, oh, this actually is something you should avoid.
In this situation, these people were born with the genetic, basically, abnormality
Right.
that then makes their cells grow irregular. Now, whether or not you could say potentially their parents had a predisposed that made their children more predisposed because their
Right.
children they themselves weren't as healthy, maybe that caused them to have, maybe, I'm not saying like Gattaca whatever, but maybe less
Yeah.
healthy
Yeah.
chromosomes themselves.
I'm just saying, like, there's got to
But
be
this
people that
wasn't.
go their whole life and that process never happens. So why?
Well, with this mutation, it's if you have this mutation,
You're just
it's
SOL.
it's a it's a you're pretty much SOL.
Okay.
Um,
I'm
but
just trying to
usually what
help.
happens
Like,
is
if
this
someone listens to
attack.
this and like, do these studies and,
Yeah,
and
this
just get back
attack
to me.
usually takes place between the ages of 12 to 24. They say that
That's a
that's
big
pretty.
range.
It's a pretty decent range, but
Yeah.
that's where like at some point it's probably going to happen to you. Kind of like if you had like um, if you had sickle cell, if you were born with sickle cell, right? Which a lot of people, it's a genetic mutation that you're born with, right?
Right.
You have a chance of going a long time without having a sickle cell attack, but at
Isn't that
some
one
point
that's
in
like
your life
that's
you're
higher
gonna
in
have
like
it.
in the black population?
Well, it's a fascinating evolution
Hmm.
of of cells that are born with a crescent shape, blood cells, red blood cells born with a
Right.
crescent shape that that makes malaria have a difficult time attaching to your blood cells. So it was an evolutionary defense that developed in Africa with as a mechanism to prevent people from getting
Well,
malaria.
what's interesting there, because like having almost gone to Haiti, I was like, I'm gonna read about malaria, and like there's people there that don't take it, and they're generally immune. But what I also read is that they leave and come live here, they lose that immunity fairly fast.
Well, if if they have sickle cell,
Hmm.
right? If they have sickle cells, they'll have sickle cells forever.
Right. So there must be something else that builds immunity to it as well, then, because they said like it. I can't remember, but it
Yeah,
was less than a year that someone would lose that, and if they went back, they would have to take medication if they didn't
interesting.
live that
I'd have
area.
to. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I have
And
to.
maybe it's not everyone, but it's like err on the side of safety. Like,
Hmm, that's
but
crazy.
they said like don't just count on your
That'd be
immunity
interesting.
if you live in the first world for very long.
Okay, so guys, we're going to transition a little bit. We're gonna end it on this article, but I need to know a little bit, Jordan. Tell me
Yes.
what's been going down in Southern Oregon with the water irrigation
So I'll
canal
tell you the little
situation.
bit that I do know because I was
Okay.
texted this by a friend who is traveling around with Stan Pulliam, and he is a candidate for governor here in Oregon. He's a great guy. You should look him up. I got a chance to meet him in person. Anyway, he was headed here next, and because of everything going on, they were kind of looking into like what should we take precautions on or whatever. Well, there is a drought going on in southern Oregon, and there's a lot of farmers that grow a lot of things down there. I don't know what their crops are, but I know that there's just farms everywhere. Because of the drought, they had said they were gonna reduce the water allowed for irrigation this year to 7% of normal. They ha-
7. Okay.
they have changed that recently, and I haven't seen it change back to 0%. Said we're not going to let you have any for it, and the farmers are like, "This is our livelihood. We just spent a year of craziness, and now you're just going to take this all away."
Mm,
So they are already they're protesting this decision because it's largely being done and reduced by, you know, I I think that most of the Lake Klamath or whatever is just a dam. Like it's anyway. So they're trying to preserve it now for this species of fish that's like apparently native to there, and they're like, "Hey, that's not worth it. You're going to kill everything. We produce things for the rest of the state and the world. We need our water." So a farmer there who has some ties to a little old
hmm.
Bundy from the whole standoff in Burns has recently purchased property right next to that valve,
Reservoir.
and all that like divides them is a chain link fence. Now, apparently, in 2001 or 11, I can't remember. There was some ones in there. They had done this as well, and the farmers went in and just turned it on. And they did it like 3 different times before they put it under guard. Well, now they have property there, and the guy specifically has stated, "We bought property here because then the feds can't run us off because we own it.
Mm, hmm.
They can't make us leave, and we plan to take a stand right here."
Hmm. Interesting. So I would be interested to see. This is something that I've been concerned about with Oregon, kind of in particular, um, because a lot of our water and our water reservoirs come from mountain runoff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so a lot of states in the Midwest, they have underwater aquifers, and a lot of their water, like their big lakes, are
Right.
supplied from massive, giant underwater supplies. And a crisis that I'm concerned about in the future with Oregon and Northern California and Washington actually as well, a lot of our water is dependent on our season, our snowfall and our snowpack,
Right.
and as far as our potable water, right? Um, And so it seems like this is an issue that is. I can't see how it's going to get better. I think this is going to be a
Yeah,
trending issue
I
that
think for
continues to get
them they're
worse.
saying like, well, you're shutting it off. It would just be a river. Let it go. Like stop. And I mean they're fighting for their livelihoods. So it's like so far they haven't done anything illegal. They're, who knows what they'll do, but in the past
Hmm.
we can see historically they at least went in and turned the valves on. Um they did like bucket brigades and all that kind of stuff. But with that dude with ties to that guy that had that standoff like that, I
Right.
don't see this going super well. Um, but also, I can't if they're really having it shut off by the state to save a fish versus save their livelihoods. I mean,
Yeah.
I would choose
Yeah.
livelihoods if it was me. I mean, just giving my honest opinion. Like, let them have the water. Like at the and
Yeah.
if you need to save the fish, save some of it and bring them back later. Like you're already unnaturally controlling it with the giant valve. I mean,
Well, and it would be interesting to see is that water would have that water basically dried up anyways. Like would
right.
have that
Yeah, so
reservoir
what are they
not
doing?
been
Preserve.
there,
It's like
right?
going back to the whole shower thought we had a few weeks ago. It's like doctors don't save lives; they just delay death. Well, like, what are you doing that for? Like, you're literally delaying death for fish. That, I mean, just being honest, like you're to harm these people's livelihoods and grow. They're not only livelihoods. It's not just about them making a living. If it was just that, like we could chat. But like, whatever they're growing probably has something to do with what like makes our food system run.
Hmm.
So, like, let's not like you want to harm that for the food system that we have for people for the fish. I don't know. I think that to have none, like, if the answer is none, I feel like that's a little extreme.
Mm, yeah.
It
Yeah,
sounds like
I agree.
bullies trying to
But
make them
also,
go under.
I'm wondering if, just by a matter of, this sounds cruel, but also not supply and demand, but like nature, I guess. Like maybe that's also an area that isn't the most ergonomical to be developed, to be having crops run. Like it wouldn't
Yeah.
be practical, right? If, and this is an extreme example, it wouldn't be practical if we tried to have row crop in the Sahara Desert.
No.
Like the amount of water it would take would just be astronomical. So maybe as this is, it sounds maybe extreme, but as climate does change,
Mm-hmm.
and whether it's man-made or just nature or nature itself, right? I think that's something we're going to have to take into consideration. Where humans are going to have to adjust to where the climate is most
I guess I would
beneficial
say
to have crops.
if there's a drought and it was the way it was before, there would be no valve. Like we wouldn't even be having this argument. They
Wait,
would
wait, say
just
that again.
so there's a valve for them to say no, you can't have it. If there
Right.
if there wasn't a
So
valve, so
maybe
they're
that's not
already
a good
they're
place already.
already unnaturally
Yeah.
unnaturally preserving things.
Is it
Maybe
a
this.
dam? Is it a dam?
Well, I know that like
Was it
Klamath,
for like high?
a lot
Was it
a
for
lot of the water
power?
was held back. Yeah, I think it actually
Is
used to be a lot more water down there.
Okay. So maybe it was an area that
Because
has
there's a lot of
low water
places that used to
supply.
be like a lake, and when they put in that dam, it's not
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
So like, they're it's supposed to like honestly like dams are supposed to kind of be held up to like to like get you through a drought, not the fish
Mm-hmm.
through a drought.
Right.
You know what
But
I
but
mean?
but I think
Like
and I think this is just practicality. As weather changes and climate changes, I think people do need to have the recognition that we
yeah,
might have to change
but here's the thing.
crop
Maybe
location.
maybe they just need to figure out like a true water solution that isn't bullying, because maybe through technology. So get this: if you could farm somewhere and it's generally warmer, you have a longer growing season, you would pipe in water to make that work because you could grow more things by piping in the water. So like your exchange for moving the water to another spot, you get a longer growing season. That's why that's why cities work. Cities are completely impractical. They wouldn't work without the farmers. Like the farmers could live their entire lives without the city existing, but the city can never exist without the farmers. So like
Yeah.
there's all these impractical things that we do because of modern society and because of comfort. So we grow in places that maybe wouldn't have made sense years ago, but now we have the technology to move that stuff so that we can get more things more for a longer period of time out of those areas. So I guess I would say, hey, if it's going to be a problem and you guys aren't going to give up the water, then figure out another solution for their water. If they were already getting it historically and you're now saving it for this fish.
Yeah, I would also need to see. I think I need. It's hard to take a stand when I don't know all the information. I guess, and I did actually look up a little bit, and there's not a lot of information on it.
It hasn't really flushed out yet, and I think it's going to in the next week or so. But them having the property next to the valve, we'll at least keep an eye on the situation and see what's going on.
Yeah.
I would say with great confidence, I don't think 0% for your crops is a good answer. I don't think 7 is either, but like there's got to be a number in there that's not 0.
Well, and also like going from, well, wasn't it 93%? You said they did a 7% decrease?
No. They were going to allow 7% of what they normally did. Now they're not allowing
I gotcha.
any.
Yeah, it's a pretty like I could see like them saying like, "Hey guys, over the next 15 years, there's going to be a steady decrease, and we're going to be transitioning or something like that, right?" Okay, guys. So we'll get back to more information on that.
Yeah, we'll just keep up on it. It'll be
guys,
interesting.
keep an ear out this next week, June 1st ish.
Is that your?
There's going to be
this
the
is
big.
An ear?
There's going to be a big release, right? The Pentagon's deadline is up to produce answers pertaining to UAPs or UFOs, whatever you want to call it. I think UAPs is kind of a silly rebranding,
like it.
but I think it's.
What is it? Unidentified
ridiculous.
aerial projectiles.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
That's dumb.
Phenomena. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Okay, so guys,
you
keep
can't
an
just
ear out.
change it when we've been saying UFO forever. It just like rolls off the tongue. UFO. UFO. If I say the other thing, I'm just gonna have to say UFO. It's a waste of time.
I just say UFO.
Well, no. So if I say UAP, someone's going to go, "What's that?" And go, "I say UFO." And they're like, "Whoa."
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Why am I saying both things now?
Nothing changed. You just made me have to explain your new thing, and it's never going to catch on. Like,
true.
It's like when I'm getting robbed. I'm always going to stop, drop, and roll because you beat that into me, even though it's not the right thing.
Truth, brother, truth. All right, so you want to do some shower thoughts, TILs?
Yep. Let's do it.
All right.
I just want to take this time to say we didn't argue as much this time, which is probably why not as many people joined us and said anything.
I love it. I think that it's good to have a little argument break time. All right, I got 3 TILs.
I do too. I'll go first because you went first last week. Today I learned a Japanese man noticed food disappearing in his fridge, so he set up a security camera and found out there was a homeless woman living in the top compartment of his closet and had been there for more than a year.
Whoa. There's that. That's that movie. That Asian movie. South Korean movie.
That Asian movie.
Yeah.
You racist. No, okay.
White.
So I don't think you're supposed to say that. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I just assume that it's all racist to somebody. No. I was like, so get this. Closets in Japan are like a room. So more than like a walk-in closet. So the dude didn't spend a ton of time in there. And apparently she was super neat. He set up a security camera and then saw her, called the police. Okay, because I read into this because I was like, I got to find more details. He called the police and said, somebody's robbing my apartment right now. They went there and they called him back and they said, it's locked. We checked it. Nothing's in there. So he was like, no, they're on the camera. So they finally went in and searched the apartment and they found her. She had moved a mattress into there, had been like up in this upper area of this. It sounded like a small room. Like it's not like our closets where we have like a closet, you know, it's it's like a big walk-in or like a spare room is their closet. And so she'd been living in there and she'd been taking showers, but she'd been cleaning and like picking up after herself. He said he described her as generally neat.
Well, there's a movie called Parasite that takes place in South Korea. Did you watch that one?
Yes. It's
phenomenal.
It is not for the faint of heart.
Really, really good movie, but that's basically what happens there, except for less murders.
Less murders. Okay. Yeah, it's anyway. Can you imagine though? Just like the food was disappearing, and then all of a sudden there's a lady in his camera.
It's amazing. My first TIL. Okay, this is actually crazy. I did not know this, but the improper storage of pistachios has been known to actually start fires. Because of their high fat and low water content, the nuts are especially prone to self-heating and spontaneous combustion when stored with like certain fibrous materials. I
Weird.
had no idea
It's
that
like hay.
pistachios.
That's weird. Like hay dries out, but
Oh
then
yeah, right.
it combusts and creates a like once it gets it's weird.
It's weird.
Seems very very similar. Huh.
Hit me.
Today I learned that veterinarians, not PAs,
Hmm.
kill themselves at rates 2.5 to 3.5 times the general population, due in part to online trolling and threats from pet owners who blame them for the death of a pet and easy access to lethal medications.
Oh my gosh. Well, freaking don't let Lassie die, man. Get your stuff together. All right, that's hilarious.
Have you been threatening your vet lately?
Um,
I'll take that as a yes and move on.
no comment. No comment.
Well,
Today
I
I
haven't heard
learned-
from them in a few weeks, and they won't respond to anything.
No comment. No comment. Today I learned that $1 million. I always like these kind of thought
Yeah,
processes, but $1 million bills laid end to end, right, is almost 97 miles. Okay.
yeah.
$1 trillion bills laid end to end is around 97 million miles, further than it is from here to the sun.
Trillion's
That's
a big
wild.
number.
The difference between billion and trillion.
And guess how many trillions that we have printed for
oh right, yeah.
to put back into our economy, which is a $20 trillion economy annually estimated. About $6 trillion.
Six
about-
times
it's
to the
about-
sun and back.
I think it's like $70,000 per family.
6 times to the sun and back, right?
It's ridiculous.
All right, hit me.
Today I learned that Fermilab used to clean its particle accelerators with a ferret named Felicia, who would run through the tubes with cleaning supplies attached and be rewarded with hamburger meat.
That's genius. That's genius. That's hilarious. I love that.
Felicia.
That's amazing.
They named it Felicia.
I love the name more than anything, Felicia.
Felicia
Oh my
the
God.
ferret. That's exactly
Perfect.
why they picked it.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
All right, my last TIL.
Felicia the ferret from Fermilab.
The Fermilab. Yeah.
Fermilab
yeah,
ferret Felicia.
Yeah. Today I learned that in addition to having eyes of extraordinary violet blue color, this is for the ladies out there, Elizabeth Taylor also had a genetic mutation at the FOXC2 gene, which actually caused her to have an extra set of eyelashes. So double eyelashes are medically referred to as, this is a weird word, but distichiasis, which basically means you have a double set of eyelashes. So women out there that pay all this money, to grow their eyelashes longer and extra makeup and stuff like that for their eyelashes, you can actually be born with a genetic mutation that gives you extra eyelashes.
They
wild.
should have like CRISPR offer that for your kid.
Dude.
Like, do you want him to have extra eyelashes?
Dude, it'll be there one day. Trust me, it'll be there one day.
That's terrifying. There's gonna be repo men, man. There's gonna be repo men.
It's kind of
And it's
exciting.
gonna be gross. Like, sorry, do you want to make your last payment on your heart while I'm holding it?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're dead.
Done.
Sorry, I couldn't pay your payment. Ugh. Okay. If you guys haven't seen that movie, you think I'm spewing off wild things, but it's terrifying.
It's classic.
Shower thoughts.
Shower thoughts.
I will go first.
Get it.
Being bar staff is literally just serving people poison until you've poisoned them too much. Then you chuck them out on the street.
Exactly. You could say the same thing about McDonald's to a degree, but
That's what I love. Most of these people are like, "You're harming my health. Get away from me without your mask." And like, you're eating McDonald's.
and actually, like any Baskin Robbins, whatever, any
Seriously.
yeah,
Anything with
restaurant like
sugar in it.
yeah,
If sugar was classified today, it would be a controlled substance.
probably should be. Okay, the fact, actually no, it shouldn't, but the fact.
You don't believe in any controlled substance. What are you talking about?
That's true. I don't. The fact that lucid dreaming is hard to master is probably good. Otherwise, it would probably turn into an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Dude, for
Like
real.
people would
That's
just
like,
want to be asleep all the time.
think about Inception. Like, that's what people would do, is they would sit around those like sleeping factories.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It would be wild.
And they would
It'd be
like
wild.
join other lucid dreams. That might be kind of fun though.
That could actually be kind of fun. That would
Yeah.
actually be incredibly fun.
Spend like decades deep in a dream and then come back out and be like, oh, Bitcoin's down $1,000 again.
Yeah.
Okay. If humans had gills and were primarily aquatic, they would still go to the beach for a vacation.
That's amazing. Also one that I had as well. Love that. Love that. Love that. Okay, this is something that really seems unjust to me, and I don't understand how it was so miscommunicated.
Okay.
How wildly inaccurate is the term "whoever smelt it dealt it"?
Terribly.
Why in the world has that become an accepted theology?
It's not a theology because that's a belief in God.
Well, that's to some people that's
Philosophy
that's their God,
policy.
man.
That's their
How
God.
in the world did somebody decide that was accurate?
I will tell you why. And
Tell
it's
me.
because human beings, long for a belief system that will allow them to tell others that they are bad and worse than they are.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
So,
That's why
I mean, that's like, that explains our entire world going all the way back. There's always a set of rules, and you don't do as good at them.
that's what religions come in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I'm saying that all people that drive for religion, because religion at its heart is people being convinced that they could follow a set of rules to somehow become clean and not
That's
accepting their faults.
But I wonder where that first originated. Whoever smelt it dealt it. That's a wild.
I can tell you exactly where. The people that perpetuated the people I just talked about. The people that started it are middle school boys.
Probably.
Hands down. The grossest, weirdest things come from that set of people. We've both been there, and we all know that that is true. Everything is funny if it comes out of like an orifice.
That's true. All right, hit me. Next one.
Let it sit for 2 minutes is possibly the most ignored instruction among microwave users.
I don't think I've ever let
No,
it
see, that's the thing. It's stupid. Do not invent a device that makes me wait after using it.
Yeah,
And
it makes
tell
me
me
wait
that
longer than
and
the
tell
amount
me
of time
that
I
it
had
saves
to use
time.
it for.
I may as well just, like, I don't even put my chicken wings into the microwave anymore. I just put them on the barbecue again because it's quicker.
So somebody said the answer to this question is 100 years, but I want to know what your guys' thoughts are, or what your thought is. How long does someone have to be dead before it's considered archaeology and not grave robbing to dig them up?
I think that's a dangerous number to put on there. I've often wondered that,
I don't
though,
think it's 100 years.
because like we dig up people now, we don't think like, oh, this is a graveyard, but we get mad about like if we find an old Indian gravesite, and that's got to be more than 100 years sometimes.
I feel like, and I say feel on purpose, it's 2,000 years. I think if you got a 2,000-year-old tomb, people are usually comfortable with you digging that up and preserving it.
This is why. So remember the other day I said you have to take something to its absurd level in order to like test if it works.
Oh yeah.
So this is why I said it's like it's dangerous to put a number on this. Because we're like, what are you gonna do? Open that up and be like, shit. It's 1,990 years and 364 days.
Gotta be 2,000.
Put it back in.
Gotta be
We'll
2.
come back tomorrow.
It's gotta be 2. Gotta have a limit somewhere.
Yep.
Because there is a limit, though, right? It's not somebody that.
I'm sure there's a limit. It can't be tomorrow. Like you can't. Like.
It can't be yesterday.
But like, I think the limit is this: if that person was buried and that civilization was lost, and we're learning about it, I don't think there's a
But
number.
see,
I think
that's
like
not
so
like
for instance,
Egypt. Like Egypt isn't lost. That civilization's still going on, and they're like every day digging up some of their old
except the parts that they're
stuff.
digging up are stuff that they forgot about because it's been so long. So they're finding out about their past. So like say for instance, giant volcano floods the Pacific Northwest, right? And you and I, all of our families, everything we know gets buried in 40 feet of ash and molten rock, right?
Hmm.
It would be acceptable in 40 years for people to dig up and discover that stuff.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. 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 That's true. Yeah.
So I
I
don't.
think I
It's
think
like
that I think the key of there being information lost. I think
yes.
that's where you get
So archaeology is like
more leeway.
is like a discovery, right? It's not even really a science. I mean, let's be real. So because there's no that they rely on scientists to help them identify what they just did.
Right.
They're just sandbox lovers. Like they're kids that never grew out of the sandbox.
That's hilarious.
So anyway, yeah, I think it's if a civilization is lost and they're like digging it up and stuff. I mean, there's a great example is like Pompeii. Although I mean it's pretty old, but people knew about it too. They were like, well, it's gone. It's under there somewhere. And we're still digging it up to this day. But I
That's
think if
wild.
that were to happen again, they would dig it up and figure out what happened. They might leave it for a
Jen-
while.
Jennifer made a comment. She said, "I don't know, but it's longer if the grave is labeled."
True.
Good call,
Super
Jennifer.
true.
Good
Yeah,
call,
if
Jen.
it's labeled, I will completely give over that is grave robbing. Like you shouldn't do
Much
that.
longer.
Yeah. What if it's not the right label though? We got to find out.
Right. Truth.
They
Truth.
I knew a guy that was in charge of moving graveyards. Like when they would move, like they
Interesting.
have to relocate. And he said one time they dropped one of them and it was really gross.
That's fascinating. I wonder what if he was paid like per grave.
I don't know, but that one, when he described it, because they encase them in concrete. Well, the concrete broke. And it was like sludge everywhere.
Ooh. Oof. That's
Yeah.
no good.
What do you do? Like, you're like, I
I
think
think
it
he
goes
just
in here.
hose it down. I think he hose it out.
Well, then is it archaeology?
I don't know, man. I don't know. You
Okay.
got any more shower thoughts?
I have one more that
Okay.
you're going to love.
Love it.
In sci-fi, an exoplanet is all one nation speaking one language only, while people on Earth speak thousands of languages.
Yeah, right. I guess eventually it would probably have a multitude of, well, or it's just they're more developed than us. Like eventually, like maybe in 1,000 years, everybody on Earth will be speaking the same language because we'll have translators and then it would
Dude,
just
we
turn
don't even
into
speak the same language as the South. And they technically speak our same language. Like,
but maybe in 1,000 years we won't be using the same type of communication. Maybe it'll be
yeah,
Neuralink. Who
I
knows?
don't think so.
Who knows, man?
We'll melt.
Who
before then. We're
knows?
going to be getting dug up by archaeologists, and they're going to find out how we talked. That's what's going
Right,
to happen.
exactly. All right, guys. Well, that's all we got for you this week. And happy Memorial Day. Thank you for all the soldiers out there that served and families that have children that served and sacrificed for us.
Specifically those who gave that ultimate sacrifice. We have
Exactly.
Veterans Day,
Exactly.
and I even have a
Exactly.
hard time with that. So Memorial Day, remember those that gave us what we have
In
and
memory.
the freedoms that we experience every day. And a lot of people do not have that in this world, and it's crazy to think about.
Value and appreciate this amazing opportunities and country and life that we have in this first world nation. So, all right, guys, we appreciate you all. Hope you have a fantastic week. Be safe. Have some hot dogs. Have some hamburguesas.
And 3 p.m. Apparently, be quiet
3 p.m. That's right.
or blow
All
a
right,
train
guys.
horn if you're driving a train.
Yeah, which is random. But yeah. All right, guys. Have a great week. We'll talk to you later.
See
Peace
ya.
out.